Welcome to this Tutor to You A Level Sociology Paper 3 walkthrough for AQA A Level Sociology. In this video we're going to focus on the 30-mark crime essay questions which appear on Paper 3 of the AQA A Level Sociology exam. The question and the item on screen have been written by Tutor to You for the purposes of this video. For copyright reasons, we cannot reproduce AQA materials. However, we have styled this question in a similar way that you would find on the exam. The question itself is asking us to evaluate realist explanations of criminal behaviour and crime prevention, which is quite a difficult topic area. There is an item, and we'll read the item now. It says, Item B. Realist approaches to crime and deviance differ from other sociological approaches in that they perceive increased rates of crime to be a realistic threat to society and offer solutions to tackle crime. These approaches vary depending upon theoretical position, with right realists adopting punitive approaches and looking to control behaviours, whilst left realists look at the structural causes of crime. Both offer solutions to criminal behaviour but differ in their approach to what causes crime in the first place. Now the item will contain some hooks that we might want to develop, but first of all we're going to decode the question, which says, applying material from item B and your knowledge, evaluate realist explanations of criminal behaviour and crime prevention. So when we look at this question, we want to think, what are we being asked to do? Now there's two things really to highlight. First of all, evaluate realist explanations. Now this means we're going to have to focus on both right and left realist explanations. And the other part of decoding the question is seeing criminal behaviour and crime prevention, which means at some point in our essay we're going to need to talk not only about how these two theories think crime is caused, but also how it might be prevented. And there are a couple of ways in which we can do this. But looking at the question, let's think about some of the contributions that realist theories have made to crime and crime prevention. So if we start with our left realists, we might talk about the impacts of marginalisation. So Lee and Young talk about the impacts of marginalisation, how it causes resentment, how that might lead to the formation of subcultures and therefore increased levels of criminality. These ideas are influenced quite heavily by functionalist ideas, particularly the ideas of Merton and Cohen. And this might be something that we come back to when we're looking to evaluate our theories. Relative deprivation. There are higher levels of criminality where there is higher levels of relative deprivation. This is something else that links into some functionist ideas that we might develop. And social and community prevention. So we've ticked our box to talk about prevention. This is something that we need to discuss in our essay. On the right realist side, we can talk about broken windows theory, the work of Wilson and Kellings, and how they perceived there to be higher levels of criminality in areas of disorder. We can talk about rational choice theory, also linked to Wilson and to Clark, and the idea that crime is a rational choice that is made by an individual who weighs up the costs and the benefits of committing an act. And this links into things like harsher sentencing, zero tolerance policing, and situational crime prevention, which is our final point here, situational and environmental crime prevention, two crime prevention strategies that were proposed from right realist ideas. We've got a few pieces of information here, and this is, I would say, is a good range to discuss in a 30-mark essay. But let's look at the item and see if we can get any more, or if it confirms some of our ideas that we've got from this question. So if we look at the item again, it says Item B. Realist approaches to crime and deviance differ from other sociological approaches in that they perceive increased rates of crime to be a realistic threat to society and offer solutions to tackle crime. These approaches vary depending upon theoretical position, with right realists adopting punitive approaches and looking to control behaviours, whilst left realists look at the structural causes of crime. Both offer solutions to criminal behaviour, but differ in their approach to what causes crime in the first place. So let's highlight some of the hooks. And we can see here the first item hook that we've highlighted is offer solutions to tackle crime. So it's hinting at us that we need to talk about crime prevention strategies. Right realists adopting punitive approaches, where we can think about harsh sentencing, what is often referred to as penal populism, increasing sentences to act as a deterrent to others, linked into rational choice theory. Looking to control behaviours, again, rational choice theory, control behaviours by removing the potential rewards and increasing the costs, and also through zero tolerance, through the police physically moving people on and taking action against minor offences. Whilst left realists look at the structural causes of crime. Now, our structural causes of crime might be deprivation, might be marginalisation. So this is confirming some of the ideas that we had once we decoded the question. Our second paragraph, and this is increasingly the case on these exams, gives us a hint at how we might evaluate some of these contributions. It talks about what causes crime in the first place. And so there is a debate between left and right realists as to whether crime is a cause of individual cultural factors or whether it is a result of wider societal structural factors. So a left realist look at the structure of society and suggest that those in the lower socioeconomic classes are more likely to be criminal because of the way that society is organised, whereas right realists tend to focus on individuals and the cultural norms that they are socialised into, a little bit like the new right and the idea of inadequate socialisation. But they would suggest that we need to act against that culture in order to reduce crime. So there is a debate here between cultural and structural factors between the left and right realists. So we move on to our introduction. Now, introductions are not necessary. However, many people do like to use an introduction to organise their thoughts and set out some of the different approaches that they're going to tackle in the main body of their essay. I would suggest that an introduction should be no more than 2 to 3 lines where you really just set out the different positions that you're going to discuss. Here I've put an example up. Realist approaches to crime and deviance have become increasingly influential in recent years in tackling issues surrounding rising crime rates. Whilst left realists look at the causes of crime and how to prevent crime in the first place, right realists argue that harsher punishment and reducing the opportunities for crime are the best solutions. You may also mention that when left and right realism came to their prominence, it was in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when we were faced with rising crime. Crime, according to the Crime Survey of England and Wales, has been falling in recent years. However, it was at its peak in the early 1990s, and this is when left and right realist theories really came to prominence. Before we start the main body, we're going to look at a bit of exam gold. Comparing and contrasting different approaches is a really good way to show analysis, and it can also be used as a form of evaluation. It can be used as a form of evaluation if it addresses the criticisms or if it supports a point that has been made. For example, if we were looking at an essay about structural theories, many Marxists, functionists and feminists say the same things occur, but they suggest it happens for different reasons. So, for example, they all suggest that we are socialised by social institutions, whereas for functionists, they think this is a positive. For Marxists and feminists, they see it as being negative, and it benefits powerful groups in society, such as the ruling class or men. We can do this with this essay and compare and contrast left and right realist approaches. And we'll show you this, how we use a left realist point to evaluate a right realist point in our first of 2 sample paragraphs. So our first sample paragraph, we're going to look at the right realist approach, and we're going to bring in broken windows theory, highly influential theory that was proposed by Wilson and Kellings. We need to talk about what is broken windows theory. So here I've explained broken windows theory. It suggests that areas that appear run down and have visible signs of degradation, such as broken windows or boarded up houses, will have higher rates of crime. So I've made my point. Broken windows theory is one right realist explanation. I've explained what broken windows theory is. I'm going to develop that a little bit further. How might broken windows be used? So how might broken windows theory be used to reduce crime? They suggest that by implementing rapid repairs and a zero tolerance policy of policing of people who are homeless or engaging in antisocial behaviours, that this can be addressed. So I've explained how this works. I'm going to back this up with some evidence, and we're going to look at how New York implemented ideas of broken windows theory in the 1990s. What they did was they cleaned up neighborhoods, they removed subway cars that had graffiti, and they adopted a zero tolerance approach to disorderly behavior on the streets. They tackled minor crimes that were occurring on the streets, moved people on, arrested people, charged people. This required additional police, and I've put this in as my next part. This policy required additional police on the streets of New York, but led to headline reductions in crime under the Republican mayor Rudy Giuliani, demonstrating the effectiveness of the approach. I've gone through this paragraph identifying broken windows. I've explained what broken windows is, how it can be used to reduce crime, and given an example of how it has done that. The only thing that is missing from this paragraph so far is an evaluation. Now, when we do evaluations, we need to explicitly evaluate the points that were made earlier in the paragraph. So if we think about two of the main points that were made, is that crime is caused by signs of disorder, and that zero tolerance policing moves individuals on who are committing antisocial behaviours. So these are two of the points, these are two of the benefits of right realist approaches. How might we criticise that? Well, crime being caused by the signs of disorder, what would left realists suggest about this? Movement of antisocial behaviours. We're moving people on, but where to? I've evaluated it this way. In red, I've echoed the language that has been used earlier in the paragraph to make the link between my evaluation and the point that has been made. I've also highlighted in red, however. This indicates to the examiner that you're changing direction, that you're going to be critiquing the point that has been made. And I've used left realist approaches. However, left realists would suggest that the signs of disorder were a symptom of structural causes of deprivation. So they are agreeing that these signs of disorder cause crime, but they are also suggesting that if we tackle the structural causes, rather than painting over the cracks as broken windows does, it would also reduce crime. So that in some ways they're agreeing with right realists, but they're suggesting an alternative way of dealing with it. That's an evaluation to judgment. Furthermore, much crime was not eradicated, simply displaced to other areas where there was no police presence. This evaluation is better than simply saying, however, critics would say this is displaced. What we've done is we've developed these 2 points and we've explained why they might criticise the point that has been made by the right realists. In our second paragraph, we're going to look at a left realist approach, and we're going to talk about left realists suggesting that the causes of crime are structural and that structural issues need to be resolved to reduce crime. So what are these structural issues? That's what we need to explain. Lee and Young suggest that marginalisation of groups leads to feelings of resentment and the formation of subcultures that cause criminal behaviour. So these structural marginalisation of groups. How are they marginalised? Well, we can link this in with relative deprivation as well. The relative deprivation caused by structural inequalities leads to increased levels of crime. Many young people have blocked opportunities to success through education and low levels of employment, and this results in criminal behaviours. So Lee and Young are saying something very similar to another theory, and we might use this to explicitly evaluate this point. What we're going to do is we're going to show how left realists would tackle this issue. So left realists argue this can be addressed through the use of social and community policies to prevent crime, such as improving education, providing job opportunities, and improving the standard of living of those who feel marginalised. Now we possibly need an example of how this might work. An example of this is New Labour's New Deal, which looked to tackle unemployment and provide greater opportunities for young people in order to reduce the feelings of frustration and relative deprivation. You could put any type of policy in here that looked to tackle relative deprivation. You could bring in some educational policies. You could bring in other forms of benefit that were introduced. You could also talk about some of the social and community policies that were introduced during this period. Now we've explained the left realist idea that it's the structural causes. Now that we've explained how left realists see structural factors influencing levels of crime and what they suggest they might do to improve it, we're going to move on to doing our explicit evaluation. Now, explicit evaluations don't always need to be criticisms, but they do need to be linked to the points that are made. So the main points that we've made are that deprivation causes crime and that individuals feel frustrated and marginalised, and this leads to crime. Now, this might make you think of some other theories that you may have covered, and that's what we're going to use to do this. I've used functionalist explanations to support left realist ideas. This is a judgment. We are supporting the argument. We do not always have to criticise arguments that are made. You can make a strength, a criticism, an alternative approach, a limitation, or some evidence to support a point that has been made, or even reject a point that has been made. Once again, in red, I've highlighted where I've linked back to the main body of the paragraph. And also here, I've highlighted in red, this can be supported by. This is our signpost to the examiner that we are evaluating it by bringing in some supporting theoretical evidence. So our evaluation here says this can be supported by functionalist explanations of crime, with both Merton and Cohen examining the reactions to blocked opportunities faced by young people. Blocked opportunities is mentioned earlier in the paragraph, so there's a link. Cohen suggested that status frustration, we've mentioned frustration already in the paragraph, causes the formation of subcultures, whilst Merton argued that a lack of opportunities to achieve social goals, we've mentioned lack of opportunities, could lead to innovation and increased criminality. So we are using functionalist ideas to support left realism, and that is a good form of explicit evaluation. We've done 2 sample paragraphs in this. You would need more to get into the 25 to 30 level to show a range and depth of knowledge and understanding. But in our conclusion, we're going to make a judgment on the effectiveness of the arguments presented. The item increasingly is hinting at ways in which a conclusion may be formed, particularly in the second paragraph of the item. And when evaluating the effectiveness of explanations, you can use other approaches to address these limitations or strengths of arguments. And that is what I'm going to do in my conclusion. I've concluded that whilst both left and right realists offer solutions to crime that other theoretical approaches do not, so there's a benefit of left and right realism, They have been criticised for focusing largely on the crimes of those in marginalised positions in society. Other theories, such as Marxism, would be critical of this, as they fail to address the true reasons why those in lower socioeconomic groups are more likely to be both offenders and victims of crime. So the Marxist critique of realism is that realism focuses largely on the crimes of the powerless, whereas Marxism looks at the crimes of the powerful. Neither left nor right realism mention issues like corporate crime, state crime. They focus on the crimes that are committed on the street rather than higher up in society. And this would be a valid conclusion to make. This is an issue with left and right realism. We've suggested one way in which right and left realism are really useful by talking about how they offer solutions to crime. However, we're also looking at a limitation of their approach by suggesting that they focus on certain types of crime only. That concludes this Tutor to You A-Level Sociology Paper 3 walkthrough on the 30-mark crime essay questions for AQA A-Level Sociology Paper 3. Thanks for watching.